And then that's the recording that started as well. So we're just giving it a few minutes for people to join us.
Great.
Good morning. Thank you to everyone joining us. We're giving it a couple of minutes before we get started.
Hello, hello. We're just waiting for a couple of minutes for latecomers. Welcome. I hope everyone's rugged up. I'm shivering in my house. If everyone can please pop themselves on mute when they enter the room, that would be great. And we are recording this session, just to let you know.
Yeah. So we're in the webinar format actually, Jane, today. So they can't come. We won't see them. They don't need to put themselves on mute.
Ah, fine. So just wait until 12:02 and then we'll kick off. And apologies if there are any loud bangs. There are 3 people above me in the roof. So welcome everyone. Just waiting another maybe 30 seconds for people to come and then we'll start. And a little bit longer. And then we'll kick off. There we go, 12:02. So I'm just going to share my screen. Here we go. Can everyone see that? Yes. Okay, so welcome to Better Futures Plus. The program, we've partnered with French Chamber, and thank you very much to Target. I don't know if you want to jump in here and say hello, Lauriane.
Yes, hello. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Jane is running this webinars like a pro, so I'm not going to say much here, but I'll be in the background listening and taking notes. Thanks, Jen. Jane.
Brilliant, thank you. So welcome, everyone. I'll just go to the next slide. We're part of the Creative Commons, so please feel free to share our recording and slides. Just bearing in mind that Schneider Electric and EDF may not be part of that same system, so don't share their slides willy-nilly maybe. So I'm joined today by 2 fantastic guest speakers. I have Andrew here and Anna from EDF. Andrew's from Schneider Electric, and what we are going to discuss with you today is the following. So I'm going to start with the energy savings opportunity and then a little bit about a recap about scope 1 and 2 emissions. I'm going to introduce a concept called Fabric First, and it's looking at building retrofits before you look at energy use, and then some practical tips for how you can reduce your energy demand before Anna takes over, and she talks about the energy market landscape and the energy hierarchy. And then Andrew's going to jump on and he's going to talk about what Schneider Electric are doing and how they're working with their customers. So just to go back to the previous slide, this is the 3rd of an 8-part series, and it's all about operations and energy. We started with business purpose and then how to measure your carbon footprint. And then this is going into a little bit more detail into your carbon footprint in the scope 1 and 2 emissions. So a little recap from a previous session. We waste an awful lot of energy. Businesses do, on average, it's 30%. These are 2 headlines from this year. And just to say, as a little example of where managing energy efficiency is really beneficial, Australia brought in some legislation 14 years ago for office buildings, commercial office buildings, and they've collectively managed to reduce their footprint by 42%. So it's definitely possible, and that's more than the average. So I just wanted to put that in there so you can see the opportunity that's up for grabs. And just to recap on your scopes, scope 1 and 2 are basically your gas electricity bills, but they're also the fuel that you burn if you own any vehicles, so trucks, cars, etc. And it's try not to overthink it. If you measure your carbon footprint, it works it out for you. And just to say, so this is an example of the carbon management platform that we use, Climate Essentials, and it's here, it's your electricity and gas bill, and it's any fuel that you burn with the vehicles you own. And then it splits it out for you and it tells you what the emissions are for those. That can be a really good way to understand your baseline consumption before you start making any action, taking any actions to reduce that footprint. So when you look at energy, it's really good to look at the space that the energy is being used in. And this is called fabric first. This is, Anna's going to show you an energy hierarchy, but this is a hierarchy based on the building. And just to talk through what this means, this slide, the space is how rooms are set out, where windows are, etc., the way the building faces when it gets the sun. So for example, if you have a room with lots of windows looking west, so they get the sun going down and lots of afternoon heat, how is the room set up? So it deals with that energy coming from the sun, and thinking about that, putting a new window into a building, it might cost you, I don't know, $2,000. And it's a lot cheaper in the long term than putting loads of lights in and then having those lights on for the duration of the building's life. The next thing to think about is the building fabric. So this is things like insulation, windows, if you have double glazed windows, if it's the types of things that it's made of. So to give that context, materials like wood don't let heat pass through them anywhere near as easily as materials like bricks and metals. So if you have windows with aluminium frames, the heat just goes straight out of the aluminium frame. My house is made of brick. I lose up to 35% of the heat just because it passes through the bricks. And, if they're wet, if there are any leaks, then the heat goes out much, much quicker. The next thing to think about is ventilation and air tightness. Drafts suck heat out and they bring heat in, so it's really important. And then you think about the energy, so what kind of equipment and lighting you have, and you want to reduce that as much as possible before the last thing is you buy any tech. So there's no point buying solar panels. If you've got loads of equipment that is wasting energy, you want to get rid of all that wastage first and then buy those solar panels. And just to flag, passive house is like a building standard that's been developed, and this is all around the passive house principles. So when you're looking at your space, you really need to understand your baseline. And we talked about this previously with measuring your carbon footprint. You can't really manage what you don't know. So setting your baseline in terms of the space and the appliances that you have in the building is really important. I've given some examples here. On the left, we're in this co-working space in West London, beautiful space. You can see these lovely windows facing west, so we can watch the sunset while we have a drink at night, but the lights are on all day and there's all this natural light, so they haven't taken a space first approach, and there's all that energy that's being used that isn't necessarily needed. I always advocate to get external objective help from an expert, so an energy expert, but if you're a very practical hands-on person and you'd like to do anything yourself, I've put in a little picture of a thermal imaging camera. You can walk around your premises and see where the heat and cold spots are, shows you where drafts are, where you lack insulation, etc. Really cool piece of tech, costs about £70 to rent. So that's something that you can do. And then also, it's really helpful if you're trying to understand the energy that you use, that you're getting accurate measurements. So having smart meters, the more recent ones are much more accurate, and looking at the energy efficiency of your appliance. So I know Anna's going to talk about this a bit, and I'm sure Andy is as well, but if you've got old appliances that aren't that efficient, replacing them, the payback period has gone down to like 18 months because they're so much more efficient now than they used to be. So it's just understanding that. And to give an example of ambient temperature control up here, thinking about how warm and cold rooms feel when you're working. your carbon footprint increases on average 8% for every degree Celsius that the temperature is raised when you've got your heating on. So if people are playing with the temperature controls on your heating system, or if there's like a cold patch in the building, it's costing you a lot of money. So understanding how the space works with the heating system you have and making sure that it's serviced regularly is really important. So finally, if you did want to do an energy audit on your own, this is just a step-by-step guide. Looking for peak periods and price hikes, really key. Start with that. If your energy bill is really high on a Sunday and no one's in the office, there's something weird happening with an appliance, figure out what that is. Habits, I know Anna's going to talk about habits, but we do things that we don't realize are energy inefficient, such as, it sounds obvious, but do you have any lights on outside during the day, like security lights that just come on? Also, if computers, etc., are left on all night, can you put them on standby? Bearing in mind vampire mode, things on standby can also use quite a lot of energy. Checking appliances, I mentioned before, making sure things are serviced regularly, really important for their efficiency. Lighting systems, do you have LEDs? Doing a little lighting audit. Don't forget leaks, looking for hot and cold spots. You can just hold your hand up to a window to see if it's drafty. And then finally, dust on radiators can suck up to 15% of their efficiency, looking at your temperature control, etc. I know I'm diving through this all really quickly, but we'll share the slides afterwards. And if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat and we'll answer them after each section. This is just a really quick example of a company that's measuring all of their appliances. You can get little bits of kit to measure them. And just to say, by doing that, they've identified that the 8 highest energy consuming appliances in this industrial bakery is 50% of their energy usage. So if you're wondering what to get serviced first, target those 8 pieces of machinery. And just a few examples of where monitoring in depth different appliances in the building has had a cost benefit. Power off alerts. This was a company that had a lot of food in freezers and the freezers turned off on the weekend. They get a little update on their phone, rush down to the facility and figured out what was wrong to save all that food. Lots of restaurants and cafes, the last 2 examples, they come in at the start of the day, they turn everything on, and then people don't turn up until brunch time. So they're, heating panini machines, heating the heat lamps above food when there isn't any food there. So it uses quite a lot of energy. Anything that gets hot uses a lot of energy. So lots of cost savings to be found there. And now I believe I'm handing over, no, sorry, one more slide. Just a few top tips from me. So there's a lot of energy you can save that you could be wasting. So try to figure out what that is. Work to the retrofit energy hierarchy if you're in a building. Try to think about how spaces are used, the fabric of the building, and then look at the appliances. It's really important to set your baseline. You can't reduce if you don't know what that first initial energy consumption is. Please don't buy any tech until you've reduced your energy first and set the new energy demand, or else you'll waste loads of money. And finally, if you can monitor things in more detail, it can mean really, really high savings. So that does lead me into Anna. Anna, it's a real pleasure to have you with me today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. So I'll now be talking about the different ways or options to progress towards a more sustainable energy system. And also I'll talk about the current energy landscape, as you said, Jane, and also what the market looks like right now. So because in the last 30 years, we've tried to find ways to reduce carbon emissions, to limit global warming, and we all act at different levels. We choose different energy options, which have been classified and prioritized in what is called the energy hierarchy. So Jane, if you could Thank you. So the highest priorities cover saving energy and improving energy efficiency. Saving energy is a lean way to work towards a more sustainable energy system, and it's about reducing waste. You've already said a few things about it, Jane, but yeah, every company, every person can do that in asking ourselves if there are any small and free but meaningful changes we can put in place to reduce energy waste. It can be very easy, like turning off the light or switching off some machinery. Then the other very high priority, the other very high priority is improving energy efficiency, which is a keen option to reduce demand. It could be putting LED lighting in place or changing the air conditioning cassette for a heat pump, basically choosing appliances with less energy loss. Then if your company consumes renewable energy, it's obviously the greenest option. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to sign a CPPA with a direct wire to a solar farm, but it could be solar panels installed on the top of your roof if it's suitable. And if you use non-sustainable resources, but you combine them with carbon capture technology, this is seen as a clean option because low levels of carbon are being emitted. Nuclear energy is also seen as a low carbon resource. And last but not least, the current way of exploiting conventional resources and compensating this with carbon offset is the mean option. So, but whether it is saving energy, improving the efficiency, consuming renewable or energy, or using low carbon solutions, all these options have led to the energy landscape we are in at the moment. So that's my second slide. Thank you. So because a handful of years ago, we had controllable conventional generation, we could increase and decrease the energy coming onto the grid depending on the demand, and we had businesses and houses to supply, and that was it. When we added decarbonizing energy into the mix, we saw more and more renewable energy coming onto the grid, as well as grid level storage, because it's not windy and sunny on demand, and intermittency is one of the challenges of renewable generation. And to support day-to-day needs, we need storage to balance it out. So nuclear generation is also another answer to intermittency, as it's a steady baseload generator. On the demand side, decarbonizing and saving energy means that houses have now their own generation assets, their own storage devices, they have connected thermostats, smart meters, or EV cars that pump up the demand in domestic property. And houses are now more demand responsive than they've ever been. But so are businesses. They can be connected and optimize their assets flexibility in turning them up or down, switching them on and off. So flexing these electric assets can save them money or earn them money because it reduces their own electricity consumption, but it also helps to decarbonize the grid and relieve some pressure. I mean, flexing assets can be fridge and freezer, heat pumps, heating, ventilation or air conditioning, can be many things. Then you add into this mix a distributed energy storage system that provides a smooth grid integration of renewable energy, which gets delivered into businesses by way of a CPPA. So it stores renewable generations and uses it during demand peaks, which means that it flattens the demands on the grid during peak hours and reduces the pressure on the grid as well. Then on the left side, you have cogeneration and district heating schemes. So that is the utilization of the steam or the heat left from energy sources for heating. And finally, there are some also microgrids, which are localized groups of many electricity sources, and they can connect and disconnect from the grid. And the power generated within this microgrid should be in balance with the demand of these local loads. So what was before conventional conventional power generation and conventional demand through businesses and homes has become much more complex. So we are in a society increasingly electrified, and power prices are crucial. And we've seen this year prices skyrocket. In previous year, not many people outside of the energy industry could really tell what was driving the market, but now everyone seems to be interested in energy, which is great. So if you don't mind, we can go back over the past year and discuss the risks that are ahead of us. So if the next slide, please. Thank you. So far this year, we've seen prices reaching unprecedented levels due to what I would call a perfect storm of bullish drivers. What you can see here are the UK power contracts over the last 12 months. Q1 23 in dark blue is the key forward contract and is holding lots of risks. And all these risks and uncertainties have led to very sharp increase. You can see on the graph between mid-June and August. And prices took off in June because of the Russian pipeline flows that were reduced. So Nord Stream 1 was flowing at roughly 33% of its capacity late summer. Then there were outages, bringing it down to zero. Then it was stopped and then sabotaged. So the pipeline is not likely to come back online soon. And but Russian gas usually came to Europe through three main routes. So through Nord Stream 1, through Velke and Malnov entry points. And they averaged in 2020, 4 terawatt hours per day. In comparison, currently we only get 300 gigawatt hours per day. From Russia, flowing through Ukraine, through Velke entry point, and this is 13 times less than what Europe was used to receiving from Russia. So there is obviously a risk that Russia could stop this flow as well. Hence why we need to keep an eye on it, especially with the winter starting. Over the summer, there were also high concerns that Europe could run out of gas by the end of winter, and that it could lead to blackouts due to low hydro through droughts in the summer and low nuclear availability. French nuclear output in 2022 has been far below past year's output, which is the reason why French peak prices were at a premium all year compared to UK prices. And all these led to wholesale prices peaking on August the 26th, when winter 22 baseload in the UK reached £850 per megawatt hour. Then in September, we saw a sharp drop. That's the number 3 on the slide, due to EU market intervention, which is usually bearish news for the market. But prices also fell due to weak weather fundamentals. So September and October were mild and windy. But what was also bearish for the market was the strong LNG supplies. These really removed the risk premium we usually see around this time of the year. October is usually the month where there is a risk that supply could go to Asia, but it hasn't happened this year. European LNG imports are 33% higher this year than they were last year, and the year is not finished yet. Because last year, a lot of LNG supply went to Asia because of high demand and high prices. But this year, Europe is the highest bidder and attracts the LNG. And that's what enabled European countries to inject into storage for so long. Until last week, actually, and they have them full to over 95% currently. I mean, obviously, the risk is now that the LNG supply could go to Asia when it starts to get colder, as we are experiencing now. And storage have actually started to withdraw for the first time on Monday. The fourth point shows how near a contract like November 22 in yellow, disconnected to Q1 23 in blue. It fell, so November 22 fell when and we started to see double-digit prices again rather than triple digits. The reason why Q1 23 stayed so high is because it is supported by buyers worried that the winter will turn cold. And recently, I mean, this week, gas prices have come off again due to temperature forecasts revised up. And this bearish sentiment caused the risk premium to be priced out again for Q1 power contracts, and they dropped off £30 per megawatt hour between yesterday and today. So, yeah, I mean, this was a bearish kind of end of the year, but going forward, there are a few drivers we really need to keep an eye on. The first being the weather. I mean, as I said, as soon as it will get cold, we'll start withdrawing more and more. And the question will be, will there be a cold snap and when? And how temperature and how will temperatures be in Asia? Then the storage level, obviously linked to the weather. How fast will they be depleted? Russian transit flows through Ukraine, will it stay by 300 gigawatt hours per day or will it drop as well? LNG imports, they are super strong at the moment and seems to stay this way, but for how long? The LNG market is a spot market, and basically shippers go where it's the most interesting. And finally, French nuclear availability, because 10 gigawatts are expected to return over the next months, but other 8 gigawatts are already delayed. So in general, every piece of bad news will make the market jump. And the gas crisis might continue past this winter because storage will need to be refilled at some point. And even with strong LNG supplies, it will potentially be hard next summer, given lower Russian imports. So that's for me. I hope it was insightful.
Yes, very insightful. Thank you so much, Anna. I'm curious. I mean, the outlook for energy prices doesn't look very good. So I'm curious to know what EDF's sort of outlook looks like to decarbonize. What's the strategy to move away from gas and petrol, etc.?
Exactly. I mean, I think I sent you a slide in Annex. Maybe that's the best way to look at it.
Yep, hold on.
But yeah, exactly, this one. I mean, we at EDF, we produce carbon net zero energy in building Britain's own wind and nuclear and solar supply. We currently meet 1/5 of the country's demand. And in doing so, we obviously help Britain achieve net zero, but you also reduce our reliance on energy imports, which could help prevent future gas price rises like we've seen this year. I mean, we produce, EDF is known for the nuclear generation, and the power we sell and produce, we sell to customers, is either produced or bought from the market. And this power is made of 63% of nuclear power, 19% of renewable power, and 15% 80% of this power comes from gas, and only not even 2% comes from coal. So, I mean, we are currently, we have a 6 operational nuclear reactor in service, and we are leading on new nuclear with Hinkley Point C in Somerset. So that should be completed in 8 years. And we are also developing further new nuclear with Sizewell C. So each of these big nuclear power plants should supply up to 6 million homes. So next to nuclear, we have, as it's shown here, so upstream, the renewables. We have an operating portfolio of 38 renewable energy sites, including battery, onshore and offshore wind. There are also two offshore wind projects under construction, and as a major EDF's renewables first major solar project in the UK. We are also involved in solar panels that we put on the roof of a number of Tesco's, for instance. And we are also developing some solution for hydrogen production. So that's on the production side. And on the customer side, so downstream, we aim to be UK leader in key low carbon customer solutions. And we do this by supplying heat pumps, energy and low carbon solutions through our partner Imtech, supply in smart meters and EV charging solutions. We also sell renewable PPAs and solar panels, as I just said before. Some of our renewable, some of our supply contracts are zero carbon or renewable tariffs. It doesn't mean that the customer's contract, that the customer receive directly from the nuclear power plant, but it's nuclear-backed contracts, and they obviously get the energy from National Grid. We are, maybe one last thing, I'm conscious of the time, but we are offering end-to-end metering solutions, because it's important to understand how, where, and when you use your energy, to monitor the performance and to then be able to make some decisions on what or where to make improvement. And I lied, I have a last point. Actually, heat pumps are in the focus of EDF currently, because gas boiler are 90 to 94% efficient, when a heat pump is around 300 to 400% efficient. So you get 3 to 4 times more heat for every kilowatt of electricity the heat pumps uses. And the government has provided grants to encourage property owners to install low carbon heating systems. And the target by 2028 is to install 600,000 heat pumps. So the challenge is that we have less than 4,000 qualified heat pump installers in the UK versus 100,000 gas-safe engineers. And that's why EDF has partnered with CB Heating and Daikin UK to create a training academy, and it will train up to 4,000 heat pump installers a year, and that will put the critical infrastructure and skills in place. So I want Andrew to have some time to speak as well, but that's what EDF is doing.
Thank you, brilliant. I'm glad you brought up the skills gap, because the Mayor is funding 5 academies around London to train those people up in this green skills gaps in retrofit, air source heat pumps, EV servicing, etc. So it is a challenge getting everyone up to speed, but it is happening, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. I'd also like to unpick with you, and I think I'll bring Andy in next, and then he can join into this discussion afterwards. But microgrids and smart use of energy, because I heard, and you may correct me on this, but I heard on a university webinar that we have enough capacity, we just don't use the grid efficiently enough. So smart grids are really important. So we'll enjoy unpicking that with you in a second. I'm going to stop sharing, Andy, and see if you can share your slides, please, and come in and talk about Schneider.
Cool, thank you. And that's great stuff that we've seen so far, and thankfully, you know, the themes I'm going to discuss today will hopefully just re-emphasize what Jane's already talked about, and also Anna as well. I love the fact that Anna mentioned microgrids, because that's what I've done for the last 4 or 5 years of my career, so I love that stuff. So yeah, good afternoon everyone. I'm Andy McKenzie. I work for Schneider Electric. It's great to be here today. We've had some really, really useful information, and hopefully I'm going to elaborate and give a bit more detail on some of the things that Jane and Anna have mentioned as well. I'm going to try and fly through some of these slides, because I think I've got a few too many, but we'll see how it goes. So just for those of you who don't know anything about Schneider Electric, I'm just going to give you a very, very high level overview of who we are. So we are a global organisation. We specialise in sustainability, software and electrical infrastructure. And 5% of our revenues goes back into research and development. So we're very much focused on sustainability and innovation around energy management, decarbonisation, etc. And hopefully you can see at the bottom there, just under the global map, a split of us as a business. We're often known for producing bits of kit to go in electrical infrastructure, products, boxes that go on the wall and send electricity around our buildings. But actually 70% of what we do as a business is focused on energy management now. So we do still have the industrial automation piece. We do have a lot of diversity in our business in terms of what we do. So we do everything kind of from high voltage distribution down to the plug socket in the household. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of that today. We're going to talk about a little bit about what we're doing as an organization. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what we're doing with our customers as well. So as a business, we have 5 guiding principles around our sustainability strategy. So first and foremost, and this ties in with what Jane was saying and also what Anna was saying about the energy hierarchy, is performance. You've got to know how much you're using, what you're consuming before you can create any kind of strategy. You need stakeholder engagement. You can have the best data in the world, but if you haven't got your teams on board and the right stakeholders within the organization, your journey is going to be a fairly short or very challenging one. We as a business, we're looking at all elements of environmental and social governance. So we are looking at biodiversity as a business as well. So everything from having rewilding of the gardens around our buildings to introducing habitats that are bee friendly, etc. So I know we're talking specifically about energy today, but it's just to give you an overview of the sorts of discussions we have as a business. So we walk the walk. Hopefully we as a business aren't just telling our customers what they should be doing around energy management, we're also doing it on our sites as well. And in terms of a model and culture, we have sustainability councils within our organisation that look at and can be quite critical of what we do as a business. We need people who are passionate about sustainability, and we need that reflection on us as a business. So I actually run the UK&I Sustainability Council for Schneider Electric, and none of our VPs, none of our executive committee have actually got an influence or say on what the structure of that looks like. That comes from the management and the operation teams upwards. So it's our ideas that get turned into reality within the business in terms of what we're doing for our business activities. So as Anna and Jane have kind of alluded to, electrification is here to stay. It's only going in one direction. We're expecting it to be a doubling of electrical demand by 2050. And we're seeing, as Anna mentioned, a lot more of what we call distributed renewables and distributed energy resources, or DERs. That's an acronym that you'll see used an awful lot now. DER can be anything from a generation source, like a solar panel, or a combined heat and power unit, as Anna mentioned, or it can be storage, it can be battery storage, it can be thermal storage, or it can be a specific load that's being managed. So it might be an industrial process, it might be a floor within a building that's being managed and monitored as a specific load within that system. So you'll hear the phrase DER used an awful lot going forwards. So the key bit for us is making sure there's no roadblocks, because sustainability can be quite a challenge when you're talking to your organization. You always find people within a business who are passionate about it, but some people see sustainability as expensive. They just associate it with costs or slowing down their business or doing things differently that they're not used to. So for us, we have a mantra of strategize, digitize, and decarbonize, and we keep it really, really simple. The strategized bit I'll come on to in just a moment. But the digitized piece is really, really important, because that's where you visualize what you're doing. That's where you visualize your impact, because it can be quite disheartening if you set an engaging strategy, go down that path, and you can't actually measure the improvements, or you can't see the improvements that your hard work has made. So a lot of what we do is around digitization, specifically focused on decarbonizing. So we're looking at metering strategies, we're looking at automation of processes in factories, we're looking at reducing heat loads for things like universities and hospitals, etc. So the type of customer base we work with is typically from sort of SME size up. So we work with very industrial and commercial clients, but a lot of the messaging I'm going to give you today trickles down all the way to our offices themselves, which can be quite small in size. So the key bits are: create a strategy, try and get over that roadblock, that hurdle quickly. Think about any businesses or organizations you want to emulate that you think look good in terms of their activity and their strategy, and just copy them to start with. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Try and replicate what you think good looks like. Track your data. Now, you might not have an up-to-date sub-metering or metering system at the start. You might just be reading your meters, but make sure you keep that data in one place. It might be a spreadsheet or something to start with, but try to build a business case towards digitization, so you're not actually having to check meter readings manually. Try and see if you can get some technology or device that will enable you to read your meters locally on some sort of software platform. You don't need to necessarily replace your meter. You can often get additional devices that will clamp onto the wires coming into your meter. They're non-intrusive, they're non-invasive, and they'll be able to tell you what your actual energy consumption is at that point in time. And measure your impact. So make sure that you are reporting back and measuring. So this is what we do as a business. We've defined success. We've got a roadmap to 2050 to get us to net zero. We've got some key gateways within there that we think are realistic. So we've got to be at certain stages in our strategy to get to net zero by 2050. We measure not just our carbon footprint, but we identify what might be changing as well. So legislation can influence your strategy, technology can influence your strategy, and we have to deploy the program. So it's great having some ideas around strategy, but you need to actually make sure that you deliver on that as well. And keep your results. Sometimes you're going to fail. Sometimes you won't make the energy savings that you want to begin with. That's okay. Fail fast, but pick yourself up quickly and look at alternative ways of getting to your goals. And there are lots of different streams of advice. Jane's already referenced there are some energy audits available. We do that as well as a business. And I know EDF have got a broad range of services they offer around infrastructure. And what you need to do is measure, iterate, and then innovate, and keep looking at innovation as well, because there are some great standard technologies out there like LED lighting, variable speed drives that can go on pumps, but there's a lot out there around innovation, particularly with things like microgrids, battery storage, etc., that will really help you get your significant carbon savings. So the grid, as Anna's alluded to with her great graphic that she had, the grid that we've all known and loved and grown up with is changing very, very rapidly. And that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, but what it does mean is we have to embrace and prepare for that. So we've got this traditional model that we've seen in the past. What we've also now got is, as I say, what we call distributed energy resources. Now, they might be privately owned on a customer site, or they might be somewhere connected to the grid, supporting grid generation. But then on top of that, we've got all kinds of different data feeds, different devices, different applications that all suddenly play a part in what our grid is doing. So if you think about the fact that you can plug your smartphone in, all the different devices you've got at home, imagine that on a commercial scale. And as Anna said, people plugging things in, switching them off at different times of the day, wind turbines generating energy at certain times, solar generating at certain times. You've got to try and find the balance between all of these different assets. And for people to sit down and look at all these different activities, even on a dashboard, if you had meters connected to all of these, telling you what all of these things are doing, it's a challenge to strike a balance between all of that information. Someone looking at what the grid is doing, what the energy prices are at that time, what your EV is doing in terms of charging, what your building management system is telling you in terms of your ventilation systems for your building. It's really, really key to have systems that manage this for you. This is what evolution looks like. So going away from going around and reading meters with a clipboard to ending up with a dashboard that tells you what your EV is doing, what your building is doing, what the grid is doing. That's quite a journey. And as I say, you need to be sensible with your strategy around that. But this is what a lot of organizations are now looking at, because as we go electric, we're going to get a lot of data. And data is only useful to us if it's information that can be actionable as well. So you need to know what that data is. You can't just ask people to sit in front of spreadsheets and tell you what you should be doing necessarily. So we've got systems in place, and this is where the digitized piece really happens. We have software packages, analytics, and so do other manufacturers as well, that can really help you condense this data down. So think about your smartphone, all of the different apps you have on there that is pulling in information all the time about the weather, about your train times, about your social media content, about messages from your family. They notify you when something's happening. It's scanning constantly in the background for information, and it notifies you of something interesting to you. So you will have set parameters to say, actually, I want to know if it's going to rain during my commuting hours because I'll get the train instead of walking home, or I'll drive in my EV. It'll be one of those things. And that's what these systems start doing. They start giving you actionable information, and they can even automate a response as well. So when we talk about things like microgrid, that can even be looking at weather forecasts to say, actually, in 72 hours, it's going to be unseasonably warm. So that standard heating profile you've got for the building, you don't actually need the heating to come on after 10 o'clock in the morning, because we know that the outside air temperature is going to be good enough. You don't need to worry about having the heating on at that point in time. So it's about pulling in different data feeds, your weather, what your building typically does as well. So there's, within building management systems, there is the ability to kind of what we call machine learn. It's not artificial intelligence, it's just the software package itself looking at what your building does every single day. So how quickly does your building heat up in the morning based on the outside air temperature? And it starts optimizing its own performance against those heating curves, as we call them. So what we're looking at here is what we would look at for a typical kind of decarbonisation strategy. Now, it looks a little bit busy, but we're trying to break this down into simple chunks, and hopefully this lines up pretty much with what Jane and Anna had on their screen as well. So the first thing is energy efficiency, or reduce the amount of energy that you're consuming. So there are lots of different platforms that you can use to measure and monitor your different systems and give you visibility. Then there's replace. So we've talked about aging assets and infrastructure that might not be energy efficient and might not give you data. So look to create business cases, and you can get expert advice on that. You don't have to do that yourself. There's lots of information in the marketplace around creating a sustainable approach to replacing parts of your infrastructure. Get balancing. So you might not be able to do everything on your site. Not every tower block in London has got space for a solar farm next to it. So unfortunately, there are some things where technology isn't going to fix it, but there may be alternatives. So we're talking to some of our customers now who are building tower blocks in London, but they're buying land outside of the city to put solar farms on. So while they're not generating power from that solar that's directly going into the building, they're creating that kind of CO2 balance by having their building that consumes grid power, and they're contributing something into the grid from solar as well. And again, this is all about engagement. So we do a lot of work with our supply chain as well. So it's not just about what we do as a business. This is about engaging with other partners that could collaborate with us and bring innovation to us in terms of ideas. We're always listening to new ideas from the marketplace, and also creating just that traceability, really, because circularity is such a key thing now. So we're even looking at the products that we make. What is the life cycle of that product? So yes, that sensor that we sell, that might be brilliant in terms of monitoring the temperature in a building and giving feedback into what that system is doing and optimizing the energy consumption. But how was that sensor made to start with? Where have the materials come from? What has been the environmental impact of that sensor itself? So we're going all the way back, not just from an energy management perspective, but we're talking about full sustainability, as I mentioned earlier. So Anna's kind of covered some of this off already with the microgrid discussion, and I won't go into a huge amount of detail on this because I know Jane just wanted me to kind of skim on the art of the possible. So when we're looking at microgrids, they're not just electrical power, they can be thermal and cooling as well. And it's about, say, for example, having a university campus. That's something we should all be fairly familiar with. You've typically got different buildings that are different fabrics. So as Jane was saying earlier, some of them will be 1970s solid concrete construction. Some of them will be BREEAM excellent buildings. And you've got to try and kind of manage the balance between all of that. So we're taking data from all of these different types of systems and balancing that against the demand of the site. So what are the requirements? What's the information streams telling us, such as weather, etc., pricing from the grid, all these good things. And we're creating this mesh, this network of data that lets us control assets automatically. So we're sitting there, we've got a microgrid solution. I can sit there and look at my iPad and it tells me that my system is running really, really smoothly. It's meeting all my carbon goals. It's generating to the standards I want it to, but also exporting potentially as well. So if it's a university campus and you've got a quiet period on the weekend when the students aren't all on the site, your solar will still be generating. So you can decide if you want to store that in a battery, if you want to charge your EV, or if you want to sell it back to the grid. And it's scalable as well. So what Anna mentioned about microgrid, it can start small, but you can build it up. So it could be a standalone building on its own. That building could then connect to neighboring properties that then suddenly create a small private network. This is, you know, really the scale and modularity that we need to get to a clean grid. And then you've got organizations like EDF that are managing what's on that grid and what's connected to it as well. So if we think local and try and help the grid as much as possible with microgrids, then we're going to start talking about something really dynamic in terms of what the future of energy looks like. So finally, just the last bit for me, we've got plenty of case studies of the art of the possible. This is one in Australia, where there is a produce market that runs 24/7. I thought you'd like it, Jane. And this has a microgrid. Now, one of the main reasons here was because they had an extremely volatile utility market where their price per megawatt hour shifted hugely. So they had to be able to go potentially off grid at certain times and manage their own energy demand through battery systems on site, PV, etc. And we've got a great video case study of this, and there's a few others on there about different buildings, different types of technologies that are available as well. And as you can see, this system has the ability to save 4.3 million Australian dollars over 10 years just from optimizing the utility on that particular site. And just on that final note where it says there that it's cut annual greenhouse gas emissions by 32%, that was from day one of this microgrid being deployed. We at Schneider, we're doing that ourselves. We've actually got a building in France, which is called Schneider Electric Intensity, and it's spelled as in city, C-I-T-Y. And that's a new build down at Grenoble, and it's actually using 10% of the energy of an equivalent building. So it's using, I'm going to have to get this right, 37 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year instead of 350, I think, for a typical building of that size. So it's about 10%, but it's got on-site generation and it's contributing to the local community with solar on its roof. So we're trying to walk the walk, and we've got the ability to help other businesses do that, as I know Jane and Anna have as well. So I'm going to pass back over. Hopefully that's not run too over, Jane.
No, absolutely perfect on timing. Thank you so much for those insights. There's so many interesting things happening, especially around innovation and smartening the grid and having microgrids and on-site generation. And I was just wondering if there's anything really interesting that's piqued your attention in terms of innovation in this space that you can talk about that you've seen. I've seen windows that are solar panels. So, yeah, you know, instead of having them on the roof, it's like everyone has windows in their building. So they could do that. And also in America, they've designed wind turbines that are basically like a meter tall and half a meter wide, and they don't move. So you can pop them on your roof and then pop solar panels on them and do wind and solar at the same time. So I thought they were two really cool innovations at the moment. Have you seen anything?
Yeah, so certainly, yeah, the glass solar is really, really cool. That's a really interesting development. I think for me, the key bit is the microgrid software, because that's one of the key bits, is that people think microgrids sound expensive. It's actually just a software layer that's sitting on top of assets that we've already got. So we've already got electric vehicles, we've already got solar panels, we've already got, well, some sites will have battery storage or be looking at it, but they've certainly got things like building management systems and existing plant. To be able to bring all of that onto one network and optimize it effectively and efficiently without having to intervene too much, for me, that really sort of brings out the happy geek in me, that is something really simple. It's about connecting what's already there, because there are going to be some revolutionary technologies that come along, like vehicle to grid, which is where you use electric vehicles to actually deploy back to the grid at certain times to help balance. That's really, really interesting. And I know maybe Anna can talk about that in a minute, if that's part of what EDF are doing. But I think for me, the software evolution is huge. The visibility, or the ability to see what you're doing and control quickly, that's awesome. That's the game changer for us. So I'm a big fan of analytics and digitization, because without that, we can't just rely on the actual generation technology itself.
No, and I suppose something else that is being looked at quite carefully is we all use energy at the same time. So splitting it out, so we're all using it at different times. I know West London has had power outages for up to 30 hours, which is a really long time without any lights or heating, etc. So yeah, I've been getting messages from my provider to say, if you turn your electricity off for an hour, we're going to pay you, which is great. But top tip, make sure your smart meter works. And I guess to bring Anna back in, are you seeing, is this a trend where it's all going, trying to get people to use energy at different times and rewarding them financially for doing that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, smart meters is really in our focus, and we are trying to incentivize our customers to have them installed. So it's linking into what Andrew just said. It's you have so many different devices right now, or opportunities to reduce your carbon emission and to consume at the right time. It's about basically also, you have all these tools, and it's about knowing how to use it, but also doing the easy things that everyone could do. So it's about these very powerful tools, but also the very basic things that people should start doing. I don't think my landlord will be happy to change my windows for something like solar, something very fancy. But at each one's level, you can do a lot. So I think it's these both extremes, very simple things, but also very complex tools that are given to us, and that we need to know, to learn how to use them.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess coming back to the technology and the software platforms, etc., there's a lot of education going on where you can download an app and it tells you what to do, for example. So big educational piece is happening at the moment. So hopefully we'll all come into the the Schneider and EDF phase, and everyone will understand it a little bit better and be able to manage it better. I guess in the last few minutes, any final comments for the audience before we wrap this up? Maybe Andy, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure. I think the one for me that I've really heard used a lot recently is a phrase called no regrets. So in the past, we've heard things like, what's the quick win technology? What's the low hanging fruit? And that normally means it's got a quick payback. So you get your money back quickly. We're reaching the stage now where a lot of our lighting is already LED, and a lot of pumps and motors already come as optimized as they can be. So you've got to look at that next level of investment, and it will be that no regrets thing. So by installing some metering, that's a no regret thing, because that gives you visualization. You can track your progress, and it sets you on that pathway then to say, right, we've got to be brave, we've got to be bold. But let's have an informed business case, but let's not regret that we waited too long to do this. So I just think no regrets, go for it.
Brilliant, thank you. Anna?
Honestly, I can't top it. Yeah, I mean, no regrets. I like it.
Brilliant. No regrets, and just start somewhere. I mean, 30%, it's such a huge opportunity, and actually it could be higher than 30%. So start somewhere. Whatever you do, it's worth it. It's worth it now because of the prices, but also because of our future and what we have on the horizon. So thank you very much to Anna and Andrew for joining me today. Fantastic to hear your insights. It's such a good overview of the whole market, and also getting into the nitty-gritty of microgrids and digital technology and where it's all going, because I know this can be a depressing topic, but it's also a really exciting topic, and it's, you know, the innovation that's happening. I like getting all techie and geeky about it, so it's a fun thing to learn about as well. So thank you very much for joining me. And just to say, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So the next session is in 2 weeks, and we'll be joined by CGI and Bouygues Group to talk about their supply chains and how they're working with them to reduce their wider scope 3 emissions. So it should be a really fun session. Please do join us, same time in a couple of weeks. And that's it from me. Thank you to everyone for joining me today. And Lorianne, thank you, Anna and Andrew, for joining me. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day, and get started on your energy footprint, please.
Thank you
very much, Jane and everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.